Okay, so here we are. This is the float tutorial. For those of you who are wanting to make Star Wars-like builds, everything in Star Wars basically floats magically off the ground. And there is a way that we can achieve this in Stormworks using the float glitch, which you may or may not have seen in many creations before. And today we're just going to show you how to make a basic float chassis that responds to pitch, yaw, roll, up, down, and has an altitude hold on it that allows it to kind of be a little bit like a repulsor engine in Star Wars. So let's take a look at how we do this. This float glitch is just a wheel and a pivot with another physics body that's pushing up on the wheel to create an upward force. And we just have to balance the upward force between the four wheels. And we can do that by using a microcontroller. So this microcontroller here has some coefficients that you can use to manipulate the pitch, roll, and yaw, and up, down, that are coming in from the gyro. And you can see here that gyro roll, gyro pitch, and gyro yaw, and gyro up, down are all being fed into this microcontroller and then split into the front left, front right, back left, and back right pivot values. And we just turn that on when we occupy the seat. So how does this actually work? I could go into a bit more detail about how this is done, but in short, we're taking the pitch, roll, and up, down, and yaw values, and we're multiplying them by these coefficients, which we want to be able to tune to just basically control how sensitive each one of those aspects are for different kinds of builds. And then there's four functions here that are basically just adding in various combinations the four elements of pitch, roll, and yaw together for each of the four pivot values. So of course, if you're manipulating pitch, you want those values to be added to the front pivots and subtracted from the back pivots so that you have a pitch that pushes up on the front and down on the back, etc. So that's what's happening there. And you can just feel free to use this microcontroller as is, and it works quite well to control your basically four modes of motion as a hover. In addition, we have the altitude set. Again, this one's pretty straightforward, although there is a little bit of sort of computation going on up here for saving values and creating an active up-down arrow that allows to actively change the set point for the altitude. But suffice to say that these three property numbers are just controlling PID, which in turn controls how and in what manner and how aggressively you attain the set point here in meters. And that set point is basically determined by some throttle or keypad in the pilot's cockpit. And then also we have an altimeter and we have a distance sensor, and we do need both of those because of course altitude and distance are two different measurements, and we actually just take the minimum of those two values. It tends to work to basically maintain a constant height above the ground wherever we are. One thing to note, it says up down to gyro, up down in. This microcontroller intercepts the up down from the seat and sends it to the gyro, which allows the seat to actually manipulate the set point of the altitude. So yeah, how do we achieve yaw? Yaw is one of those things that is a little bit difficult to achieve with this float glitch, just because we have a two-dimensional shape here, and we want to be able to move it in more than just two dimensions to achieve yaw, rotation about the vertical axis there. So we have two options. The first option here is to have these two pivots. These pivots can actually rotate the entire axis of the float to allow for yaw, and I think I just put raw left right values into there, so I'm actually not even using the gyro for those. And yeah, more or less that's all it is. So you can see that we've had it preset to 2 meters here. That's actually at an altitude of 14, but the distance is around 2 meters here, so it's taking the minimum of those two values to keep me 2 meters above the ground. And then I've got pitch, I've got roll, I've got up-down control here, and yaw. And the yaw is achieved like that because by sort of moving the planes of those two sets of wheels, we actually create a vector in the plane that we want to achieve yaw. So there we are. There is another way to achieve yaw, actually. I tried to condense the float chassis to like a minimum size. So this is what I call the mini float chassis, and all of the same things are going on here, except there's one extra element. I didn't want to move the planes of the float engines too severely in such a small, compact shape. So to achieve yaw here, we actually put all of our float engines, that is to say the wheel glitch with the pivot, on separate bodies that are actually rotating at a constant angle on one more axis here. So this is kind of a 2 degrees of freedom for these float engines here, and I've basically made it so that they're stuck on a 45, and that's a kind of fun way around the problem, because now we actually don't need to move the planes of the float engines to achieve yaw. We can actually just do that in the microcontroller using the same method that we basically had before. So we've got our pitch and our roll, but now the yaw is really nice and spicy. Instead of, relying on the leg of the pivot, we're actually pushing on the wheels in the microcontroller, just using another summing function there. So yeah, that's 2 ways that you can achieve yaw, and a simple rundown of how to build a basic float so that you can basically mimic some repulsor engines, and hopefully use these to make some pretty sweet Star Wars builds. Of course, if you're here, you know that I am obsessed with Star Wars builds in Stormworks. So if you want to check some of my Star Wars builds out, feel free to basically go to my Steam page or check out any of my posted creations. And here I'll give you a little preview of the TIE Outlander, which is coming soon. Boom. Alright guys, well that's everything for this video. I hope you learned something about how to achieve some float, and I will see you guys in the next video. See ya.